The observation deck of the Corinthian Military Academy hummed with the usual morning activity. Commander Vexther stood with his claws clasped behind his back, watching the training grounds below through the reinforced glass. His scales rippled with barely contained frustration as he observed the latest batch of cubs stumbling through their combat drills. "Pathetic," he growled to his second-in-command, Officer Krell. "These hatchlings would not survive a single rotation in actual combat. They lack discipline. They lack focus. They lack the killer instinct of true Corinthian warriors." Krell's tail twitched in agreement. "Perhaps we are being too lenient with them, Commander. The old ways were harsh, but they produced soldiers." Below them, a small cub, no more than 5 solar cycles old, collapsed during an endurance run. The drill instructor, a scarred veteran named Sergeant Thrack, descended upon the fallen youngling with bellowing fury. The cub's cries echoed across the training field as Thrack forced him back to his feet, shoving him forward to continue the run. Vexther had seen this scene play out countless times. Cubs crying, instructors screaming, fear driving every lesson. It was the Corinthian way. It had been the way for thousands of years. Fear bred obedience. Pain bred strength, or so the philosophy went. Yet their graduation rates had been declining for 3 cycles now. More cubs were washing out, breaking under the pressure, or worse, developing psychological trauma that rendered them unfit for service. The Galactic Council had even begun questioning the Corinthian military's training methods, threatening sanctions. That's when the human arrived. Commander Vexther remembered the day clearly. The human had arrived with credentials from Earth's interspecies exchange program, something about educational methodologies and positive reinforcement techniques. The human's name was difficult for Corinthian vocal cords to pronounce properly, so everyone simply called him Marcus. Marcus was unremarkable by Corinthian standards. He stood barely as tall as a juvenile Corinthian, possessed no natural armor or claws, and moved with what appeared to be laughable fragility. When Marcus had proposed taking over training for the most troubled group of cubs, the ones who cried the most, who failed the most, who were closest to being expelled, Vexther had nearly laughed in his face. But the Galactic Council's pressure was mounting, and Vexther was desperate. Against his better judgment, he had agreed to let the human try for 1 lunar cycle. That was 3 months ago. Now, Vexther watched something that would have seemed impossible before Marcus's arrival. On the secondary training field, a group of 20 cubs, the same ones who used to sob through their morning drills, were running obstacle courses with determination on their young faces. And at the center of it all stood Marcus, calling out encouragement. "Excellent form, Rix. I can see how much you've improved. Kira, watch your footing on that wall. There you go. Perfect. Thorn, remember to breathe in rhythm with your stride. You've got this." What shocked Vexther most wasn't the human's gentle tone, though that was bizarre enough for a military training environment. It was the cubs' reactions. When Marcus called their names, they didn't flinch in fear. They didn't cower or prepare for punishment. They smiled. Vexther had never seen Corinthian cubs smile during training, not once in his 40 years of military service. "This is absurd," Vexther muttered, though his conviction wavered as he watched a small female cub, Kira, he thought her name was, successfully scale a climbing wall she'd failed dozens of times under Sergeant Thrack's instruction. When she reached the top, Marcus was there, offering what humans called a high five. The cub's tail wagged with pride. "Commander," Krell said quietly, "their performance metrics have increased by 43% since the human took over." Vexther's head snapped toward his second. "What?" "I have been reviewing the data," Krell admitted, pulling up a holographic display on his wrist device. "Endurance runs improved. Combat simulations improved. Tactical problem-solving improved. And most notably, their psychological evaluations show dramatic decreases in stress markers and increases in unit cohesion." The display showed undeniable statistics. The cubs under Marcus's training weren't just performing better, they were excelling beyond what even the most promising groups had achieved under traditional methods. How? Vexthor demanded. He does not yell, he does not punish, he does not instill fear. How can this possibly work? As if sensing his confusion, Marcus's voice drifted up from the training field, clear and patient. All right, team, gather around. The cubs immediately responded, forming a circle around the human, not because they feared punishment for being slow, but because they genuinely wanted to hear what he had to say. Marcus knelt down to their level, something no Corinthian instructor would ever do. It was a sign of weakness to lower oneself before subordinates. But the cubs leaned in, attentive. I know that last drill was tough, Marcus said. I saw some of you struggling. Rix, I noticed you were breathing hard on that second lap. Thorn, I saw you stumble on the rope climb. Vexthor expected the cubs to hang their heads in shame, but they didn't. They simply listened. But here's what else I saw, Marcus continued, his voice warm. I saw Rix push through even when he was tired. I saw Thorn get back up and try again. I saw every single one of you refusing to quit, supporting each other, working as a team. And that's what real warriors do. A small cub, the same one Vexthor had watched collapse earlier under Sergeant Thrack, raised a tentative claw. But we made mistakes, Instructor Marcus. We were not perfect. Marcus's face did that strange thing humans called smiling. Zek, making mistakes is how we learn. Every great warrior in history made thousands of mistakes before they became great. The difference between a warrior and a quitter isn't whether you make mistakes, it's whether you keep going after you make them. He stood up, addressing the whole group. Tomorrow we're going to run this course again. And you know what? You'll probably make mistakes then too, but you'll make different mistakes because you'll have learned from today. And the day after that, different mistakes again. And each time you'll be stronger, faster, smarter. Because that's what warriors do. They learn, they adapt, and they never give up on themselves or their teammates. Yes, Instructor Marcus. The cubs shouted in unison, their voices filled with enthusiasm rather than the mechanical obedience Vexthor was used to hearing. Dismissed for lunch. Great work today, all of you. I'm proud of every single one of you. As the cubs dispersed, chattering excitedly among themselves, Vexthor made a decision. He activated the communication panel and transmitted a request for Marcus to report to his office. 20 minutes later, the human stood before the commander's desk. Marcus was dusty from the training field, but his posture was respectfully attentive without being submissive. Another human peculiarity that Vexthor was beginning to understand carried its own form of strength. You wanted to see me, Commander? Marcus asked. Vexthor studied the small alien before him. By all Corinthian logic, this creature should be prey, not a teacher of warriors. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Your methods, Vexthor began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. They are unlike anything in Corinthian tradition. I know, Marcus said simply. They appear weak, soft, not befitting military training. I understand that's how it looks from your perspective, Marcus replied, showing no offense. Vexthor's claws drummed on his desk. And yet your cubs, the worst performers in the entire academy, are now outperforming groups trained by our most experienced instructors. Explain this to me. Marcus considered for a moment. May I speak freely, Commander? You may. Fear is a powerful short-term motivator, Marcus began. It can make someone run faster, fight harder, obey instantly. But fear has a cost. It damages confidence, crushes creativity, destroys trust, and creates brittle soldiers who break under unexpected pressure. He gestured toward the window overlooking the training grounds. Those cubs used to cry because they were afraid of punishment, afraid of failure, afraid of their instructors. That fear didn't make them stronger. It made them fragile. They weren't learning to be warriors. They were learning to survive their own training. Vexthor felt something uncomfortable stirring in his chest, doubt about principles he'd held for decades. Marcus continued, "What I do isn't soft, Commander. It's actually much harder in a different way. I expect excellence from those cubs, real excellence, not just obedience. But I also show them that I believe in their potential, that mistakes are part of growth, and that their worth isn't determined by whether they fail but by whether they keep trying. I teach them to be strong from the inside out, not just to hide weakness." "And when they face real combat," Vexthor challenged, "when someone is trying to kill them, will your positive reinforcement protect them then?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Commander, I'm from Earth. My species has been at war with itself for our entire history. We've faced extinction-level events, hostile environments, predators that could tear us apart with ease. We have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. But we survived and thrived because we learned to adapt, to innovate, and most importantly, to support each other." He leaned forward slightly. "The strongest human warriors aren't the ones who were broken down and terrorized in training. They're the ones who fight with purpose, who trust their teammates absolutely, who can think creatively under pressure because they're not paralyzed by fear of making a mistake. That's what I'm teaching these cubs. Not to be fearless, fear is useful, but to be brave, which is very different." Vexthor was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "The Galactic Council has requested a demonstration of our training methods. In 2 weeks, all military academies will showcase their top-performing units." Marcus nodded. "I'm aware. I am assigning your group to represent the Corinthian Military Academy." The human's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Commander, they've only been training under my methods for 3 months." "They are the best we have," Vexthor interrupted, the words difficult to say but undeniably true. "Show the Council and show me that your methods can produce warriors worthy of the Corinthian name." Marcus straightened. "We'll be ready, sir." 2 weeks later, Vexthor stood in the grand arena alongside military commanders from 7 species. The Galactic Council observers sat in their judgment seats, ready to evaluate the various training methodologies on display. One by one, military academies from across the sector presented their elite units. The performances were impressive, precise, powerful, intimidating. The young warriors moved like well-oiled machines, responding to commands with mechanical efficiency. Then came the Corinthian demonstration. Marcus's cubs took the arena floor and Vexthor felt his heart racing. They looked so small compared to the other units, so young. For a moment, he regretted his decision. Marcus stood at the edge of the arena, no microphone, no amplification. He simply called out, "All right, team, show them what you've got." What happened next would be discussed in military academies for years to come. The Cubs didn't just execute the combat course, they dominated it. They moved with confidence, creativity, and stunning teamwork. When Rick stumbled on an obstacle, Kira was there instantly to help him recover, and they both finished stronger. When the course threw them an unexpected challenge, a deliberately sabotaged section that would normally cause panic, they adapted on the fly, Zek calling out new formations that the others implemented seamlessly. They weren't perfect. They made mistakes, but each mistake was met with immediate adjustment, with teammates supporting each other, with determination rather than fear of punishment. And most remarkably, when the exercise concluded and Marcus called out, "Well done, team," they didn't just stand at attention. They celebrated together, tails wagging, scales flushed with pride and accomplishment, while still maintaining their formation and discipline. The arena was silent for a moment. Then one of the council observers, a wise Eltharian diplomat, began to applaud. Others joined, and soon the entire arena was filled with approval. After the demonstrations concluded, the council convened. Vexthor stood with the other commanders, awaiting judgment. When the council's decision was announced, Vexthor could barely believe what he was hearing. The Corinthian method, Marcus's method, was being recommended for study and potential implementation across all galactic military academies. That evening, Vexthor found Marcus on the training field. The human was sitting on a bench, watching the sunset, while several cubs practiced nearby voluntarily, something that would have been unthinkable before. They weren't required to be there. They wanted to be. They train even when not required, Vexthor observed, sitting beside the human with some difficulty. The bench was not designed for Corinthian physiology. They're not training, Marcus corrected gently. They're playing, practicing because they enjoy it, because they want to improve, not because they have to. Vexthor watched young Zek attempting a difficult climbing technique, failing, laughing, and trying again. I was wrong about you, human. You were operating with the best knowledge you had, Marcus said diplomatically. Tell me truly, why did you come here? Why leave your homeworld to teach Corinthian cubs? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the younglings. Because throughout human history, we've learned the hard way that the most effective warriors aren't created through fear and brutality. They're forged through purpose, trust, and the knowledge that someone believes in them. I came here because I saw cubs who deserved better than to cry during training. They deserved to become the warriors they were capable of being. He smiled. Besides, someone has to show the galaxy that humans have something valuable to contribute beyond our stubbornness and lack of natural weapons. Vexthor made a sound that might have been a Corinthian laugh. You have shown us that strength comes in unexpected forms. On the field, Marcus called out, Zek, adjust your grip 2 inches to the left. The cub did so and successfully completed the climb, then turned to Marcus with a beaming expression. Great job, Zek, Marcus called. I knew you could do it. As Vexthor watched the cub's proud stance, the way his scales flushed with accomplishment, the commander understood something fundamental. These cubs no longer cried during training because they had learned something more powerful than fear. They had learned to believe in themselves. And that, Vexthor realized, was the most dangerous thing any warrior could possess, not just skill or obedience, but the unshakable confidence that they could overcome any challenge because someone had shown them they were capable of greatness. The human had been right all along. Strength from the inside out was far more formidable than strength born from fear. Instructor Marcus, Vexthor said formally, the Corinthian Military Academy would be honored if you would consider a permanent position training our future warriors. Marcus looked at the commander, then back at the cubs on the field. I'd be honored, Commander. These cubs have a lot more to teach the galaxy. As the two of them sat in comfortable silence, watching the younglings practice with joy rather than terror, Vexthor reflected on an old Corinthian saying, the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. Perhaps, he thought, humans understood something his people had missed. The strongest steel wasn't forged through heat alone, it was tempered with patience, shaped with purpose, and polished with pride. And in the arena of galactic warfare, warriors forged with such care would prove unstoppable. The end.